All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar on DataPower, the power of deployment automation. I'm Rupert Hamzit, Head of Sales at MidVision. I'm joined today by Richard Bettison, CTO and co-founder of MidVision. So what are we going to cover today? In today's session, we're going to start off with a brief overview on MidVision and some of the challenges that we're helping customers address in the marketplace today. We'll talk briefly about RapidDeploy and DataPower, some key concepts of the technology and how RapidDeploy underpins continuous delivery, the adoption of which is growing rapidly within organizations today, with one recent study indicating that 65% of companies have started down the path of continuous delivery today. We'll then talk about the RapidDeploy plugin for DataPower, which enables release and deployment automation of your DataPower environment. And lastly, we'll finish off with a demo of the DataPower plugin for RapidDeploy, showing you some of the automation tasks available today. Before we move on, I'd like to cover off a few quick housekeeping points. Today's webinar will last for around 45 minutes. The session is being recorded and a link to the recorded session, including slides, will be sent to you by email after the webinar. If you have any questions, please use the questions section on the GoToWebinar panel on your screen. We're not going to answer questions during today's session as we want to keep it to a tight 45 minutes, but we will take all your questions, comments and feedback and get back to you shortly after this presentation. Okay, so why are customers focusing on automation solutions today within the application release and deployment space? There continues to be pressure for IT teams to manage key business risks such as security and compliance, to deliver innovative applications faster and more frequently to the business, and yet the pressure to reduce IT costs and improve business agility remains constant. Through introducing automation across the application lifecycle, right the way from development through to production, removing manual script-based tasks, customers really are addressing many of these demands, and they're seeing massive value in automation solutions within this space. So MidVision are an automation software specialists working with enterprise customers and partner organizations worldwide. We provide solutions for application release and deployment automation, enabling our clients on their journey from continuous integration to continuous delivery, often architecting automation solutions which underpin and support their efforts to adopt a DevOps culture. Our flagship product, RapidDeploy, was developed over 14 years ago within a Tier 1 bank by one of our founders in order to orchestrate middleware deployments. We continue to work closely with this and many other organizations worldwide within highly regulated industries such as finance and healthcare, supporting their business-critical operations, demonstrating the robustness of our tool and its ability to support many security, compliance and audit functions necessary within corporate environments today. We continue to be recognized by Gartner as a key player in the application release automation market, helping to shape the market going forward. So let me pass you now over to Richard Bettison, CTO and co-founder of MidVision.
Thanks for that introduction, Rupert. So today I'm going to take you through a demonstration of using RapidDeploy and DataPower. But first of all, let's go through a few items about what is RapidDeploy. So RapidDeploy is a tool that we provide. It's focused on deployment automation. It allows you to provision your base binaries, or in the case of DataPower, to deploy firmware. It allows you to deploy configuration, and in the case of DataPower, that would mean your domain configuration. And it allows you to manage your releases. In the case of DataPower, that means that we can take some configuration changes, or we might call it code or configuration, from our development DataPower device and promote that through all of our target environments. So RapidDeploy also has toolset and product integration. So RapidDeploy can be backed off by an SCM repository, such as Git or Subversion. It can store deployable artifacts in an artifact repository, such as Maven, Nexus, or Artifactory. And we can kick off external builds, such as building via Jenkins, for example. It also has reporting tools and security, etc., that you would expect of such a tool. So RapidDeploy is manageable by inbound and outbound APIs. So we have a web UI. RapidDeploy is a web application running in Java, so it has a web UI. But it also has JMX and web services UIs, and pretty much everything that you can do through the web UI you can also do through the JMX and web services UIs. So the strength of RapidDeploy really is its ability to manage complex heterogeneous environments. So you might have, for example, the focus of today's demo, a large number of DataPower environments, but they may also be communicating with, handing off data between, for example, WebSphere or WebLogic environments, web servers, messaging services, and RapidDeploy is able to deploy all of these in an end-to-end environment through all of your end-to-end environments in your route to live. RapidDeploy, as I said earlier, is built on Java and has a plugin-based framework, which means that it's very easy to extend. You can download and install any of the RapidDeploy plugins that we supply. We have some third-party suppliers of plugins also, and indeed you can write your own plugins. So why choose RapidDeploy? Well, I mentioned the plugin framework a moment ago. We have a large number of plugins covering middleware, database, messaging, and independent software vendors. In the middleware space today, we are not looking at any of the products that we have, but if you have DataPower, you may well have one of these middleware products such as WebSphere Application Server, WebLogic, JBoss, etc., .NET, Tomcat, Apache, which you might want to manage with RapidDeploy. You can also manage the deployment of your database schema changes or reference data for Oracle, DB2, or MySQL, and messaging engines. We're very strong on the messaging engine section. WMQ, WMB, and today we're going to be looking at DataPower. Okay, so we've already said you can orchestrate complex middleware layers, so you can put various different components from these sets of deployments together so that you can deploy not only your DataPower environment, but at the same time you can deploy a Tomcat application server, WebSphere, WebLogic, etc. to create your end-to-end environment. So let's focus now more deeply on the DataPower deployment solution. So as I said earlier, the RapidDeploy server has three main APIs. There's the REST API, the JMX API, and the Web UI. So RapidDeploy then can make a further web service API call out to a source DataPower domain or a device. Now today what we're going to show is exporting a domain. So here we can make a call from RapidDeploy, either from a user entering something in the UI or via a web service call to export the domain. And that domain will be exported into the MidVision framework server and then could be backed off to a SCM repository such as Subversion or Git, so that you can keep track of changes made to that DataPower golden domain in an SCM tool. And then what we can do is we can package that configuration for that DataPower domain with all of the additional configuration needed to deploy it to all of its target downstream environments and create a package that can then be deployed to those target downstream environments via, again, a web service API. So let's have a look at the pipeline that we're going to look at today. What we're going to do is we're going to show a development environment. We're going to show exporting some changes from that development environment, or development domain. We're then going to deploy that to two test domains. We're then going to perform some human approval of that. We're going to say, yes, that imported correctly into those test domains. And then we're going to release that into two production domains. Okay, so let's see how that will look in RapidDeploy. In RapidDeploy, stringing these different functions together is something that we call a deployment plan. So here you can see that we've got the first task number 1 is export the development domain and create a package. And then task number 2 is do a deployment to a test1 domain, and then do a deployment to a test2 domain, and then have a look at that test2 domain and test1 domain if we want to, and say, okay, has that exported or imported the configuration that we wanted? Yes, it has. Let's go back into RapidDeploy. We'll approve that release, and then that deployment will go into the prod1 domain and the prod2 domain. Okay, so let's just go through a few key concepts of the RapidDeploy tool. So the main object inside RapidDeploy is the orchestration project. And this project really represents a set of environment agnostic steps that will be performed to perform the deployment on all target environments. Okay, so we have about 300 different tasks that you can use. Each task is either in the framework or is part of a plugin that we install, and we can select from a palette a set of those, a number of those tasks to perform our specific deployment. And in DataPower I'll show you some of these tasks that we can use. Now when we're going to perform a deployment, we need to connect to a target server. In the case of DataPower, this doesn't really mean anything specific in terms of the target device. This means a Unix or a Linux box or possibly a Windows box that we're going to connect to. And today we're just going to be using the actual RapidDeploy framework server as the target server. So the target environment is another key concept, and this contains the configuration to allow us to connect to the target DataPower device. So for example, it will have a URL or a host or a port that will enable us to make that connection, and in the case of DataPower it will also potentially have a DataPower domain. And then we have the deployment package. Now the deployment package I mentioned earlier, this is all of the configuration to allow us to connect to the target environment, as well as all of the DataPower domain configuration that we want to deploy. Now you may choose to export and import a domain between DataPower devices, or you may choose to export and import a component of a domain. So today we're going to do a whole domain and show how that is migrated through the environments, but you don't have to do a whole domain. You can do any configuration object that's held within that domain. You can perform an export and have that then kick off a route to live deployment that will deploy it through all of the target environments. So let's have a look a bit more deeply at the project object. It defines the orchestration, as I said before. That's basically an XML file of all of the different tasks that we are going to run for this particular deployment, but it's edited through the RapidDeploy UI. It also contains a log4j file, and this file allows you to change or set the logging levels as you wish, so that you can start with debug level, but then when you move to production you might want to move that to just error. And then we have a set of files that define all of the environment-specific configurations of the target environments we need to connect to. And in the case of DataPower, these would be one for each of the domains that we want to actually connect to. There are a set of XML files. There might also be some properties files if we want to do some environment-specific search and replaces, or there could indeed be some XML files if we wanted to do some XPath replacements. There are also some external resources that we can define, so any project can define any number of external resources that it wants to pull into the package as part of the deployment, and today we won't be using that. So we'll ignore this, databases and URL libraries. So we would expect as well that all of these files will be backed off to and stored in a SCM repository. And then when we zip all those files up together with their external resources, they will all be compressed into a deployment package, which we would expect to be stored in an artifact repository. Today we'll be using file system for both the SCM repository and the artifact repository, but I would expect that normally you would use an industry standard such as Maven or Nexus. So how are projects packaged? Well, we've got those XML files, the log4j files, and the environment configuration files, and any external resources, and they're all zipped up into this archive, and that's then stored in our artifact repository. And as we saw there, we had two environments, environment A and B, so package version 1 can be deployed to environment A and B, and that might be two different DataPower domains. Now we can add a new environment, environment configuration C. Now that might be another DataPower domain on the same or a different device, and for today's demo we'll be doing everything on the same device for ease, but typically these would all be on different devices. So we can then put all those in a package, and that package version 2 can now be deployed to environment A, B and C. And we can see this here. We can see package version 1 being deployed to environment A and environment B. So we have version 1 deployed. That might have a particular version of configuration. And then we can deploy at a later date package 2. So now version 2 is deployed, and then version 2 is also deployed to environment B, and then version 2 can now additionally be deployed to environment C. Okay, so let's move on to the demonstration. And the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to log into the DataPower device. As I said, we're using just one device today. And we're first of all going to have a look and see how many domains we've got. And actually, we've got just two domains, a default domain and a development domain. So I'm going to go and have a quick look at that development domain. Inside that development domain, we have a web service proxy. What we're going to do in a moment is we're going to make an export of that and create some new domains. So here's that web service proxy. Its state is up. Just wait for the DataPower device to load. So we can see we have some configuration here for this web service proxy. We can view all of the various bits of configuration that we have. And we'll come and look at these in a moment to make sure that they get replicated. Okay, so we've got that, but what we need to do now, of course, is we need to export that configuration and re-import it into a different domain. So let's leave that now and log into RapidDeploy. So this is, I'm going to do all this through the RapidDeploy UI, but of course you could also do it through the web service or JMX interfaces. So when you start RapidDeploy, I just log back in, but when you start RapidDeploy, you will see this welcome page, which gives you a little bit of information. Now, first of all, let's see what we're actually going to deploy. And what we're going to deploy is a deployment plan of 2 projects. So let's have a look at those 2 projects. So we've got a DataPower export project. You can see that here. And on the front page of the project, you can see we've got a name, we've got a description, etc. We've got an owner and an orchestration XML. These are all default values. You wouldn't need to change those. But that orchestration XML basically leads us to these sets of tasks. So we're taking a backup and we're doing a DataPower export. Okay. Now let's have a look at the other job. It's the DataPower release. We'll come back to these projects in a moment. I'm just going to very quickly go through them now, and then we'll kick off the actual deployment. So here we have a DataPower create domain task. So if the domain doesn't already exist, it will get created. If it does exist, it won't. And then DataPower domain deployment task will just deploy the configuration to that domain. You can see the values that we set on here are very simple. This one just says fail on error, true or false. And this just says, okay, take the domain config zip file, which is inside the archive root, and that's the one that you're going to deploy. Now, this zip file may be an entire domain, it may be called something else, and may just be a part of a domain. That's absolutely fine. Okay, and what we've done is we've actually created from these 2 projects a deployment plan, and I'll show you my deployment plan. And this is just a set of individual deployments. So an orchestration sits inside a project, and a project can sit inside a deployment plan and be deployed to many different environments. So we're going to look at the DataPower export and release plan, and we're going to run that. Let's go through it and explain the different components within it. Okay, so we can see here that we've got 2 projects we've got selected. We've got the DataPower export project, which is actually going off to our development domain and doing an export. And then we have 4 of the DataPower release projects specified, but each one, as you can see, is to a different environment. So we're exporting the development domain on the local server, and then we're deploying to test1 domain, test2 domain, prod1 and prod2 domains. And each one of these domains will have its own specific config. Not only its connection information, but of course it might have individual search and replace parameters. So we might want to be replacing URLs, for example, or anything else inside the configuration at deployment time. We can move these up and down. We can run them in parallel, and I'll show you how to do that later. You can select and add other projects here to build up a large deployment plan, and they might be of the same type of technology, so DataPower, or they might be anything else. They might be WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, scripts, whatever else it might be that you want to run. Okay, so here we select the version that we're going to deploy. Here we're going to deploy version 002. And we can specify here any late configuration. There isn't any late configuration for these projects, but this allows us to put configuration in at deployment time, which is not specified earlier in a data dictionary item. And we'll come to data dictionary items later. Okay, so what we're saying here is we can now apply dependencies. So we're saying first of all we need to do the export, then we need to do the import to the test1 domain, then the import to the test2 domain, then the import to the prod1 domain, and then the import to the prod2 domain. We could have run test1 and 2 in parallel and prod1 and 2 in parallel, but because I'm deploying today to the same DataPower device, I'm going to do that serially. Okay, and then here we're saying on the prod1 domain, we're going to have a manual execution. So somebody's going to have to log in and approve the deployment here to production. We could also here schedule these deployments if we wish to, but I'm not going to do that today. And I can also take and compare snapshots if I wish to, and I'll show you how to do take and compare snapshots and compare deployment packages over time later. Okay, so let's execute this request. So what this is going to do is it's going to take each of those deployments, put them on the job stack, and the very first one it's going to run is the export of that development domain. It's going to export that domain to a zip file on the RapidDeploy server. It would check it into SCM if we wanted it to. It will add in all of the configuration for the downstream domains, the test1, test2, prod1 and prod2, and then it will start the deployment to the test1 domain, which will kick off the pipeline through all of the domains. Okay. It's just going to take a while to set up. Okay. So, in fact, it already finished doing this one, which is the development export, and it's now gone on to running the deployment to the first test1 domain. View logs in real time so we can see exactly what it's doing. So here we get an overall progress. Here we can see some file transfers occurring, the plugin, the orchestration, which is the framework, the XML with a set of tasks running on this target project, the actual package we're deploying, and then we can see it's running the initialization task, the DataPower create task, the DataPower domain deployment task, and we can also view logs in real time. So we can also go and look at previous jobs, and the jobs as they've completed. We can also take a look at the log file, so we can have a look in here at the deployment. You can see very extensive logging here. So we're getting a lot of data out. You can see the actual job running down here. It's creating the domain. It's doing the import. Okay, so if we were to go back now into our device, we should see these domains being created. Okay, so now we can see the test1 and test2 domains have both been created. So let's go and have a look at one of those domains. Let's go and have a look at the test1 domain. Let's see if we created that web service proxy. Sure enough, we did. There it is. So I think we're happy that that deployment was successful. Just wait for it to go in. Yep, that looks good to me. So go back into RapidDeploy and look at executing jobs. We can see now that this is waiting for us to approve this deployment into production, and that's now actually what I'm going to do. So that's now going to kick off that deployment to the production domain, and we'll see those additional domains getting created. So now if we just go back into projects and we'll have a little look around the project configuration. So we'll go to the DataPower release project. And we looked at the orchestra and show that the SCM repository is currently pointing at just local file system, but we can select different SCM tools. We'll see that the artifact repository is in fact also pointing at the local file system, but we could of course select any of the other tools, and if we choose a different tool we'll see a different screen to represent that tool, and these screens are all defined within the plugin, so here we would be able to specify some Maven artifacts, etc. We'll put that back to local file system. So here we can see that the product is DataPower. This just defines where various things are stored inside the package that's created. And here we see the target environments that we have specified. It's very easy to create a new environment. You can just clone an environment. And here we can see the different packages that we have specified. Okay, so let's go and have a look and see whether that job has completed. And in fact those jobs have completed, so let's just go back here and see whether they were created. I need to refresh the page. Wait for DataPower to come back, and now we can see we have also got those production domains. We'll just check on one of those, make sure the web service proxy was created. And here we can see that it was. Okay. What I'm just going to show you now is we can see the different packages that we had for that project, which I showed you previously through a different menu. If we go and have a look at DataPower release. So here we are, we've got the various projects, and we can actually compare releases with other releases, because we have plugins for comparison tools. I'm using here Beyond Compare. So we'll just run that. Okay, and so here we can compare the two packages that we selected, 1 and 2. I'm going to change the comparison. We can see actually nothing really changed. The only thing was we created a new package from 1 to 2, and the timestamp changes, but that's all. But it is quite nice to be able to navigate down and see all of the configuration changes. Or indeed inside the DataPower domain you can actually look at all of the configuration changes that you've made, and you can do that between packages at any time. Okay. So we can also do through here compare exported environments. I won't do that at the moment, but we can compare environments that we've taken the snapshot of from target environments, so that we can say, well, what did it look like before we did the deployment, and what did it look like after the deployment. We take a snapshot, we get a zip file that's just the same zip file that we deploy. It's very easy. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers the demo. We've had a good look through, seen what can be done. I think I'll hand you back now to Rupa, who can just finish off the presentation. Thanks all for your time.
Thank you, Richard, for today's presentation, and thank you for joining today. This webinar has been recorded and a link together with the slides will be sent to you by email. We would love to hear from you with any questions, feedback and comments on which we will get back to you shortly. Thanks very much for listening and goodbye.